Is Islam a religion of peace? Let's watch Medhi Hasan trying to protect Islam and say that it's not a religion of war. Let's take a look.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Lovely to see you all here tonight. We are having a very entertaining night, are we not, with some very interesting things being said from the other side of the house tonight. Let me begin by saying, as a Muslim, as a representative of Islam, I would consider myself an ambassador for Islam, a believer in Islam, a follower of Islam and its prophet. So in that capacity, let me begin by apologizing to Anne-Marie for the Bali bombings. I apologize for the role of my religion and me and my people, for the killing of Theo van Gogh, for 7/7. Yes, that was all of us. That was Islam, that was Muslims, that was the Quran. I mean...
It was. And I'll prove it to you later. Let's keep watching. Astonishing claims.
On a factual point, you said that Islam was born in Saudi Arabia. Islam was born in 610 AD. Saudi Arabia was born in 1932 AD. So you were only 1,322 years off. Not bad? Not bad.
It was born in the region where Saudi Arabia is currently standing. That's what he meant. Same thing. Just like people say that Abraham came from Iraq, but he came from Mesopotamia. Iraq was created later. Let's continue.
There. Talking of maths, by the way, a man named Al-Khwarizmi was one of the greatest mathematicians of all time, a Muslim, worked in the golden age of Islam. He's the guy who came up with not just algebra, but algorithms. Without algorithms, you wouldn't have laptops. Without laptops, Daniel Johnson tonight wouldn't have been able to print out his speech in which he came to berate us Muslims for holding back the advance and intellectual achievements of the West, which all happened without any contribution from anyone else other than the Judeo-Christian people of Europe. In fact, Daniel David Levering, the author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and author of The Golden Crucible, points out that there would be no Renaissance, there would be no Reformation in Europe without the role played by Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd and some of the great Muslim theologians, philosophers, scientists in bringing Greek texts to Europe.
Still doesn't prove that Islam is not a religion of war. Are there not great Muslim people who helped society and invented great things? Nobody ever said that. But is Islam, as a way of thinking and a belief, is it a peaceful belief? Let's take a look.
As for this being our university, I will leave that to the imagination as to who is our and who is there. I studied here too. An astonishing set of speeches so far making this case tonight. A mixture of just cherry-picked quotes, facts and figures, self-serving, selective, a farrago of distortions, misrepresentations, misinterpretations, misquotations. Daniel talked about my article in the New Statesman, which got me a lot of flack, where I talked about the anti-Semitism that is prevalent in some parts of the Muslim community, which indeed it is. Of course, I didn't say in that piece that it was caused by the religion of Islam. In fact, modern anti-Semitism in the Middle East was imported from, finish the sentence, Judeo-Christian Europe, where I believe some certainly bad things happened to the Jewish people. In fact, Tom Friedman, Jewish-American columnist in the New York Times, told me in this very chamber last week that he believed, had Muslims been running Europe in the 1940s, 6 million extra Jews would still be alive today. So I'm not going to take lessons in anti-Semitism from someone who's here to defend the Judeo-Christian values of a continent that murdered 6 million Jews.
Is he speaking on behalf of the Muslims that slaughtered the Jewish people in Morocco? Or that slaughtered the Jewish people in Farhud? Or completely ethnically cleansed the Jews from Arab countries or North African countries? These Muslims? Or the Muslims that killed about 600 Jews in Khaybar, completely beheading them because they refused to convert to Islam? These Muslims, Medhi? The same Muslims that are doing horrific things to European girls, white girls, in the UK, in France. Is it a coincidence that their names are Muhammad and Ahmed and Muhammad and Ahmed?
I don't think Europe is evil or bad. I'm a very proud European. I don't want to judge Europe on that basis, but if we're going to play this gutter game where we pull out the Bali bombing and we pull out examples of anti-Semitism in the Islamic community, then of course I'm going to come back and say, well, hold on. I mean, look, let's be very clear. Daniel here was a last-minute replacement for Douglas Murray, who had to pull out. And Douglas and I have a well-documented differences, but to be fair to Douglas, as to be fair to Anne-Marie and to Peter, atheists. Atheists see all religions as evil, violent, threatening. What the problem I have with Daniel's speech is that Daniel comes here to write this robust defense of Christianity, forgetting that his fellow Christians, people who said they were acting in the name of Jesus, gave us the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, the anti-Jewish pogroms, European colonialism in Africa and Asia, the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, not to mention countless arson and bomb attacks on abortion clinics in the United States of America to this very day. I would like a little bit of humility from Daniel first before he begins lecturing other communities and other faiths on violence, terror, and intolerance. But
well, Islam specifically is meant to prevail through violence and jihad. That's a core principle in Islam. It is even believed that you will not go to Jahannam or heaven if you don't commit jihad on your way up. You heard it correctly. Meaning that if you don't die committing jihad, you will go to hell with your skin burning off and you have to drink boiling water. And then once that's done, and your skin's done burning off, it's going to regrow and then it's going to burn again for eternity. Muslims that don't practice Islam are believed to be just as bad as the kuffars. Just as bad. That's why in their holy text, it is completely justified to kill whoever is not a Muslim. And I can give you quotes if you'd like. For the cause we decreed for the children of Israel, that whosoever killeth a human being for other than manslaughter or corruption in the earth, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind, and whose saveth the life of one. It shall be as if he had saved the life of all mankind. The sentence, other than manslaughter or corruption in the earth. Corruption in the earth is anything that's opposing Islam, anything that opposes Allah, anything that opposes Prophet Muhammad. If you kill any person that doesn't oppose Islam or oppose Muhammad, it will be as if he has killed the entire of humanity. That's the sentence that all Muslims like to slip out. They don't like saying that sentence. Weird, huh? Islam promotes killing whoever's not a Muslim. And that's justified by their code of laws in the Quran.
Thank you. Take some water. Take some water. But I would say this, to address the gentleman's very valid point here, I'm not going to play that game. I don't actually believe that Christianity is a religion of violence and hate because of what the LRA does in Uganda or what Crusaders did to Jews and Muslims in Jerusalem when they took back the city in the 12th or 13th or whatever century it was. I believe that Christianity, like Islam, like pretty much every mainstream religion, is based on love and compassion and faith. I do follow a religion in which 113 out of the 114 chapters of the Quran begins by introducing the God of Islam as a God of mercy and compassion. I would not have it any other way.
The Quran doesn't even start or is not even written in a chronological order. People just thought, let's do it from the longest chapter to the shortest chapter. It's not even, the Quran doesn't make sense in its order. So if you go specifically to the things that Muhammad say, you will see the vile beliefs in Islam against the free world, the vile beliefs of Islam against the kuffars and the disbelievers. Medhi Hasan is currently lying about Islam. Before 9/11, barely any mentions about Islam being a religion of peace were made. After 9/11, all of a sudden that kind of rhetoric was starting to be pushed out, that Islam is a religion of peace, compassion. That is a complete and utter lie. And the people who say that people who commit terrorism are not real Muslims, these are the real Muslims. These are the Muslims that read their book and follow it. These are the Muslims that completely go according to what Muhammad instructed them to do, what the Quran instructed them to do. So don't try to beautify this thing by saying that terrorists are not real Muslims. They're committing jihad exactly as they're told in their holy book in the Quran.
I don't follow a religion which introduces my God to me as a God of war, as some kind of Greek God of wrath, as a God of hate and injustice, not a
Surah 9:29 states, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah nor the last day, nor hold the forbidden which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth." So that means that turns me into a kuffar, that turns me into a disbeliever, and horrific things need to happen to me according to their code of laws. Of the Prophet of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission, and feel themselves subdued. Now, if you read the tafsir about specifically tafsir is an explanation of a specific sect of Quran, they have different tafsirs that are accepted. So according to the tafsir, feel themselves subdued, meaning we have to feel humiliated and dishonored. That's according to their book, the book that Medhi Hasan tries to protect so much. The punishment of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and strive with might and main for mischief through the land is execution or crucifixion, or the cutting off of the hands and feet from opposite sides, or exile from the land. That is their disgrace in the world, and heavy punishment is theirs in the hereafter. Now, I want you to tell me something. If this is what their holy book instructs them, and most terrorist attacks in the world are happening because of Islam and not because of Jews or because of Christians, you don't see Jews and Christians currently trying to prevail and dominate over other religions by violence. Not with horrific acts like 9/11 or the horrific acts of 7/7 or the beheading of a British soldier called Lee Rigby by two Muslims. Their reasoning for beheading him was he was going to kill Muslims in Afghanistan. So that gave them the legitimacy to fight the people who oppose Islam, because that to them is waging war on Islam. That is justified according to this. Islam is not a religion of peace. It never was a religion of peace, and it will never be a religion of peace. And the last 1400 years prove so.
All. As Adam pointed out, you go through the Quran and you see the mercy and the love and the justice. And yes, you have verses that refer to warfare and violence. Of course it does.
I dare you to show me one thing in the Quran that promotes peace. One verse. Please, write it in the comment section below. One verse that promotes peace in Islam.
This is not a motion about pacifism. I'm not here to argue that Islam is a pacifistic faith. It is not. Islam allows military action, violence in certain limited contexts. And yes, a minority of Muslims do take it out of that context.
They read the Quran and execute it exactly as it is. He's lying.
But is it religious? We talked about Woolwich. Daniel and Anne-Marie have suggested that it's definitely religion that's behind all of this. Well, actually, what I find so amusing tonight is we're having a debate about Islam, and the opposition tonight have come forward. We have a graduate in law, a graduate in modern history, a graduate in chemistry, and, you know, I admire all of their intellects and their abilities, but we don't have anyone who's actually an expert on Islam, a scholar of Islam, a historian of Islam, a speaker of Arabic, even a terrorism expert or a security expert or a pollster, let alone to talk about what Muslims believe or think. Instead, we have people coming here, putting forward these views, putting forward these sweeping opinions. Listen to Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago, one of America's leading terrorism experts, who, unlike our esteemed opposition tonight, studied every single case of suicide terrorism between 1980 and 2005, 315 cases in total. And he concluded, and I quote, "There is little connection between suicide terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism or any of the world's religions. Rather, what nearly all suicide terrorist attacks have in common is a specific secular and strategic goal to compel modern democracies to withdraw military forces from territory that the terrorists consider to be their homeland." And the irony is, when we talk about terrorism, the irony is that the opposition and the Muslim terrorists, the Al-Qaeda types, actually have one thing in common, because they both believe that Islam is a warlike, violent religion. They both agree on that. They have everything in common. Osama bin Laden would be nodding along to everything he's heard tonight from the opposition side. He agrees with them. The problem is that mainstream Muslims don't. The majority of Muslims around the world don't. In fact, a gentleman here started quoting all sorts of polls. Gallup carried out the biggest poll of Muslims around the world of 50,000 Muslims in 35 countries. 93% of Muslims rejected 9/11 and suicide attacks. And of the 7% who didn't, they all, when polled and focus grouped, cited political reasons for their support for violence, not religious reasons. And as for Islamic scholars and what they say, well, Daniel talks about our University of Oxford. We'll go down to Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, get hold of a man named Sheikh Afifi al-Akiti, who is a massively well-credentialed and well-respected Islamic scholar who has studied across the world, who in the days after 7/7 published a fatwa denouncing terrorism in the name of Islam, calling for the protection of all non-combatants at all times, and describing suicide bombings as an innovation with no basis in Islamic law. Go and listen to Sheikh Tahir al-Qadri, one of Pakistan's most famous Islamic scholars, who published a 600-page fatwa condemning the killing of all innocents and all suicide bombings unconditionally without any ifs or buts.
There's something in Islam called taqiyya, meaning as long as you can protect the prevailing of Islam, you can lie on behalf of it and say, no, 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 I condemn it, it's not okay. But Islam specifically was built on wars, on waging wars against people who did not practice Islam. That's how Islam grew to be what it is today. So don't come here and tell me that these terrorist attacks are not religious. Of course they are religious. And I'm sure that right before they bomb themselves or do the horrific things that they do, they yell Allahu Akbar and they yell some sort of religious chant. Now, here's another challenge. Please go to any one of your Muslim friends, any one of your Muslim relatives. And again, I have nothing against Muslims, but I just want to show you exactly how they view the world. They view the world through a different type of lens. They view it from a Sharia type of lens. Go and ask them, do you think the United States should turn into a Sharia law country? Go ask them if they think that the UK should turn into a Sharia law country. Sharia law is an Islamic law country. You know, completely oppressing gay rights, completely oppressing women, because that's what Sharia law is. Imagine that in the US, a woman that wants to walk without a hijab, she can't do that because if she walks without a hijab, aywa alayki Shabbat Shalom. That's it, she's done. So just imagine the US being a Sharia law country. Imagine Australia being a Sharia law country. Imagine the UK being a Sharia law country. Go and ask your Muslim friends if they believe in the United States or any Western country to be a Sharia law country. See what they say. And then judge for yourself. Why do I not see any Muslims condemning Hamas? Why do I not see any Muslims condemning Hezbollah or Boko Haram or all these terrorist groups that oppose the West? They just promote what's in the book. So give me a break with this ridiculous lecture. Now, do I think that a lot of Muslims are not peaceful? Of course I think they're peaceful. But I just think they don't understand their text well enough. Because if you are a devoted Muslim, you should follow the text to the letter. And the letter in this text is nothing peaceful.
There's nothing new here. This is mainstream Islam, mainstream scholarship, which has said this for years. You don't go out and kill people willy-nilly in the high street or anywhere else, on a bus or a mall, based on verses of the Quran that you cherry-pick without any context, any understanding, any interpretation, or any commentary.
Just to clarify, the Quran is not written in a chronological order. The Quran doesn't make sense in its order, meaning that you cannot take things into context. You can't. The Quran is not like the Bible, which is a story. They took a bunch of people that heard this story and heard this story and heard this story and combined according to the amount of people saying, yes, this happened, this didn't happen. And they just combined and compiled this Quran based on different stories from different people. When you read the chapter that instructs you specifically to do things in the Quran, you can't tell me it's taken out of context.
I didn't say it doesn't happen at all. I never said it didn't happen. I don't blame Islam. Yes, it's a very good point. And a lot of us are campaigning against that. And we're campaigning against it in the name of Islam. We're campaigning against it in the name of various interpretations of Islam.
If you're campaigning against it on the name of Islam, then you're not a real Muslim. Islam precisely instructs you what you need to do to go to Jahannam. And Muhammad needs to be a role model for all Muslims. So does that mean it's legitimate to marry a 6-year-old, just like Muhammad did with Aisha, his wife? But again, go and ask your Muslim friends if it is legitimate for a 50-plus-year-old man to marry a 6-year-old child. See what they say.
Anne-Marie comes and scares us with her talk of Sharia law. I would like to see the book of Sharia law. It doesn't exist. People argue over what Sharia law is. And you empower the extremists by saying there is only one version. You empower them all. I don't believe you took any interruptions, Anne-Marie, so I think you should stay there for a moment.
Several countries.
Here's what we're dealing with. Here's what we're dealing with. I took your point. Here we are dealing with a 1,400-year-old global religion followed by 1.6 billion people in every corner of the world, a quarter of humanity, of all backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities. And yet the opposition tonight wants to generalize, stereotype, smear in order to desperately win this debate. And here's my question, if we're going to generalize and smear. Okay, people say yesterday's bombers, and we've got to be careful, there's a trial going on, were yesterday's attackers, motivated by Islam? Big debate. I don't believe they were. Let's say they were. Let's say Faisal Shahzad, the Times Square bomber, was motivated by Islam. Let's assume, for sake of argument, that Richard Reeves, the shoe bomber, was motivated by Islam. If Islam is responsible for these killings, if Islam is what is motivating these people, and Islam is therefore not a religion of peace, a religion of war, then ask yourself this question: why aren't the rest of us doing it? Why is it such a tiny minority of Muslims are interpreting their religion in the way that the opposition claim they are? Let's assume there are 16,000 suicide bombers in the world. There aren't. Let's assume there are for the sake of argument.
So it's not that Medhi Hasan performs these acts, but the fact that he goes to Oxford to protect Islam and claim it is a religion of peace. He now lowers the guards again so other Muslims can commit more attacks, and then Medhi Hasan can go again and say, oh, no, these are just radical people. They don't represent us.
0.001% of the Muslim population globally. What about the other 99.99% of Muslims who the opposition tonight either ignore or smear? The reality is that the rest of us aren't blowing ourselves up tonight. The reality is that the opposition came here tonight not worried about the fact that me and Adam might pull open our jackets and blow ourselves up tonight because we're followers of a warlike warrior religion which wants to take over Europe and Daniel's university. The issue is this. The issue is this. Unless the opposition can tell us tonight, and Peter Atkins is here, one of our great atheist intellectuals, can tell us tonight, can answer this question tonight, why don't the vast majority of Muslims around the world behave as violently and aggressively as a tiny minority of politically motivated extremists? Then they might as well give up and stop pretending they have anything relevant to say about Islam or Muslims as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say this to you. Think about what the opposite of this motion is. If you vote no tonight, think about what you're saying the opposite of motion is. That Islam isn't a religion of peace, it's a religion of war, of violence, of terror, of aggression. That the people who follow Islam, me, my wife, my retired parents, my 6-year-old child, that 1.8 million of your fellow British residents and citizens, that 1.6 billion people across the world, your fellow human beings, are all followers, promoters, believers in a religion of violence. Do you really think that? Do you really believe that to be the case? They say that in the Oxford Union, the most famous debate was in 1933, when Adolf Hitler looked out for the result of the King and Country motion, where they voted against fighting for king and country, and Hitler was listening out for the result. Well, tonight, 80 years on, there are two groups of people around the world who I would argue are waiting for the result of tonight's vote. There are the millions of peaceful, non-violent, law-abiding Muslims, both in the UK, Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond, who see Islam as the source of their identity, as a source of spiritual fulfillment, of hope, of solace. And there are the phobes, the haters, the bigots out there who want to push the clash of civilizations, who want to divide all of us into them and us and ours and their.
It is believed that about 10% of all Muslims are jihadis. If we have 1.8 billion Muslims, that means that 180 million Muslims worldwide support jihad. The rest are not really understanding what their book stands for. The people who read the book, word for word, know exactly that it instructs people to commit jihad. But what Medhi Hasan is doing right here is, it's called taqiyya. Taqiyya allows him to lie on behalf of Islam, to claim it is a religion of peace. He can say that a small fraction commits these terror attacks, but I can give you a statistical fact that will blow your mind. Since 9/11 until today, 46,000 terrorist attacks that took place in 70 countries were committed by radical Muslims. These Muslims were promised to go to Jahannam. And hey, it makes sense. If my book instructs me to do something specific, and I go ahead and do it, in order to go to heaven instead of going to the boiling hell, I will do it. Because I strongly believe that my afterlife is going to be absolutely amazing. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, see you. Bye-bye.